The helicopter blades cut through the thin mountain air as Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez pressed his face against the small window. Below them stretched the rugged terrain of Afghanistan's Hindu Kush Mountains, a maze of rocky peaks and hidden valleys where enemy fighters had been launching attacks on coalition forces for months. The intelligence reports were clear: a high-value target was operating from a compound in this remote region, coordinating strikes against American and Afghan forces. Rodriguez turned to look at his team. 5 of the Navy's finest SEALs sat quietly in the cramped helicopter cabin, each man lost in his own pre-mission thoughts. There was Chief Petty Officer Jake Thompson, a veteran of 3 deployments with arms like tree trunks and eyes that had seen too much war. Next to him sat Petty Officer First Class David Kim, their communications expert whose steady hands could work magic with radio equipment even under enemy fire. Across from them, Petty Officer Second Class Miguel Santos checked his sniper rifle for the 100th time, his movements precise and methodical. Petty Officer Second Class Alex Carter, barely 23 but already proven in combat, sat with his medical kit, ready to patch up any wounds they might sustain. Finally, there was Petty Officer Third Class Ryan Murphy, the youngest member of their team, whose nervous energy was barely contained as he fidgeted with his weapon. The mission briefing had been straightforward. Intelligence indicated that Ahmad Nazir, a Taliban commander responsible for numerous attacks on coalition forces, was hiding in a compound located in a valley approximately 15 kilometers from the Pakistani border. The compound sat on elevated ground, surrounded by rocky terrain that provided natural defensive positions. Satellite imagery showed multiple buildings connected by stone walls, with clear sight lines in all directions. It was a fortress designed to spot approaching enemies long before they could get close. Rodriguez knew this wouldn't be a simple raid. The terrain favored defenders, and Nazir wasn't known for traveling light. Intelligence suggested he kept at least 20 armed fighters with him at all times, experienced men who knew the mountains better than any foreign forces ever could. But the mission was critical. Nazir's network had been responsible for the deaths of 12 American soldiers in the past month alone, including an entire squad that had been wiped out by a coordinated ambush just 2 weeks earlier. The helicopter pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. 5 minutes to drop zone. Weather's holding steady, but we've got reports of increased radio chatter in the area. Could be nothing, but stay sharp. Thompson nodded and gave hand signals to the team. They had rehearsed this insertion dozens of times. The plan called for a fast rope insertion onto a rocky ledge approximately 2 kilometers from the target compound. From there, they would move on foot through the mountainous terrain, using natural cover to approach the target without being detected. The insertion point was chosen specifically because it offered concealment from the compound while providing multiple escape routes if things went wrong. Rodriguez felt the familiar knot in his stomach that came before every mission. It wasn't fear exactly. After 6 years as a SEAL, he had learned to manage fear and channel it into focused energy. It was more like anticipation mixed with the weight of responsibility. These men trusted him to bring them home safely, and he had never let his team down. He didn't intend to start now. The helicopter began its descent, and Rodriguez could see their insertion point below. The rocky ledge looked exactly as it had in the satellite photos, but seeing it in person always brought new details into focus. The terrain was even more rugged than expected, with loose stones and steep drops that would make movement challenging. The good news was that the same terrain that would slow them down would also provide excellent cover from enemy observation. 30 seconds, the pilot announced. The team moved with practiced efficiency. Santos secured his sniper rifle across his back, while Kim double-checked his communication equipment. Carter made sure his medical supplies were properly fastened, and Murphy took deep breaths to calm his nerves. Thompson stood near the rope, ready to be the first man down. 10 seconds. Good luck, gentlemen. The helicopter hovered 20 feet above the rocky ledge as Thompson threw the fast rope out the door. Without hesitation, he grabbed the rope and slid down into the darkness below. One by one, the rest of the team followed. Rodriguez went last, hitting the ground just as the helicopter pulled away, its engine noise fading quickly as it headed back toward base. The silence that followed was absolute. At this altitude, the air was thin and cold, and the only sound was their own controlled breathing. Rodriguez looked around at his team, all of whom had landed safely and were already taking defensive positions among the rocks. The insertion had gone perfectly. Kim immediately set up his communications equipment and established contact with their command center. Base, this is Viper Team. Insertion complete. All personnel accounted for. beginning movement to objective. The voice that came back was clear and professional. Copy, Viper Team. Weather remains stable. No change in intelligence picture. You are cleared to proceed with mission. Rodriguez pulled out his map and compass, though he had memorized the route hours earlier. The compound lay roughly northeast of their position, across two ridges and down into a valley that intelligence said was Nazir's stronghold. The route would take them through rocky terrain that provided good concealment but would be physically demanding. They needed to cover the distance while maintaining stealth, which meant moving slowly and carefully. Thompson approached Rodriguez and spoke in a whisper that barely carried in the thin air. "Route looks good, boss. Terrain's rougher than expected, but that works in our favor. Should take us about 3 hours to reach the final observation point." Rodriguez nodded. 3 hours would put them in position just before dawn, which was exactly what they wanted. The plan called for them to observe the compound during daylight hours, confirming the target's presence and identifying defensive positions. Then, they would wait for darkness before launching their assault. The team began moving northeast, with Thompson taking point and Santos bringing up the rear. They moved in single file, maintaining a spacing of about 10 meters between each man. The rocky terrain made silent movement challenging, but these men had trained for exactly these conditions. Each step was carefully placed, each movement deliberate and controlled. After 30 minutes of steady climbing, they reached the first ridgeline. Rodriguez called for a brief halt while Kim checked for any radio communications that might indicate they had been detected. The communications specialist worked his equipment with quiet efficiency, scanning frequencies used by Taliban forces in the region. "Clean sweep," Kim whispered. "No chatter about American forces. Looks like we're still undetected." They continued their movement, descending into a narrow valley before beginning the climb toward the second ridge. The terrain here was even more challenging, with loose shale that threatened to give way under their weight. Murphy slipped once, sending a small cascade of stones down the slope, but he recovered quickly and they continued without incident. Santos, monitoring their rear, tapped Rodriguez on the shoulder and pointed back the way they had come. "Movement on the ridgeline behind us. Could be local herders, but we should keep an eye on it." Rodriguez pulled out his binoculars and studied the distant ridge. After several minutes of observation, he spotted what Santos had seen, two figures moving slowly along a goat path about a kilometer behind them. They appeared to be herders driving a small flock of goats, a common sight in these mountains. But Rodriguez had learned never to assume anything in this environment was innocent. "Could be shepherds, could be spotters," he whispered to Thompson. "We'll maintain our current route but stay extra alert." The team continued climbing toward the second ridge, their pace steady despite the challenging terrain. Rodriguez found himself thinking about the mission briefing and the intelligence that had brought them here. Nazir was described as a careful man who had survived multiple attempts to capture or kill him. He chose his hideouts well and kept experienced fighters around him. Intelligence suggested he had been planning something big, possibly a coordinated attack on the main coalition base in the region. As they approached the crest of the second ridge, Thompson held up his hand for the team to halt. He crawled forward to observe the valley beyond, then returned with concerning news. "Compound's right where intelligence said it would be," Thompson reported quietly. "But there's a lot more activity than expected. I count at least 30 fighters, maybe more. They've got sentries posted on the high ground around the compound, and I can see heavy weapons positions." Rodriguez moved forward to see for himself. Through his binoculars, he could clearly see the compound nestled in the valley below. It was larger than the satellite photos had suggested, with multiple buildings surrounded by stone walls. Armed men moved between the buildings with the confidence of people on their home ground. Most concerning were the defensive positions that had been constructed since the satellite images were taken. Heavy machine guns were positioned to cover all approaches to the compound, and fighting positions had been dug into the surrounding hillsides. "This is way more than 20 fighters," Rodriguez muttered. "Looks like Nazir's been expecting company." Kim set up his communications equipment and contacted base with their observations. "Base, this is Viper Team. Target compound is heavily fortified with approximately 30 fighters. Multiple heavy weapon positions and prepared defensive positions. Request guidance." The response came back quickly. "Viper Team, maintain observation. Intelligence is reviewing your report. Stand by for updated mission parameters." While they waited for word from command, Rodriguez studied the compound through his binoculars. The level of preparation suggested that either Nasir had been tipped off about the mission, or he was naturally paranoid enough to maintain this level of security at all times. Either way, it complicated their mission significantly. Santos joined Rodriguez at the observation point. "Boss, I'm seeing something that doesn't make sense. Look at the building on the east side of the compound, the one with the blue door." Rodriguez shifted his binoculars to the building Santos indicated. At first, he didn't see what the sniper was referring to. Then, he noticed it. The building appeared to be heavily guarded, with more sentries than the others. But what made it strange was that the guards seemed to be facing inward, toward the building, rather than outward toward potential threats. "Looks like they're guarding something inside that building rather than watching for external threats," Rodriguez observed. "Could be where they're keeping Nasir, or it could be something else entirely." Before Santos could respond, Kim's radio crackled with an urgent transmission from base. "Viper team, abort mission immediately. Return to extraction point. We have intelligence indicating your position may be compromised." Rodriguez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "Base, can you clarify the nature of the compromise?" "Negative, Viper team. No time to explain. Move immediately to extraction point. Helicopter will be standing by." Thompson was already gathering his equipment when Rodriguez heard something that made his blood run cold. From somewhere in the valley below came the sound of diesel engines starting up. Through his binoculars, he could see armed men running between buildings and vehicles being prepared for movement. "They know we're here," Thompson said grimly. Rodriguez made a quick decision. "Pack it up, we're moving. Santos, keep eyes on that compound until we're ready to move. Kim, maintain communication with base and get me an exact time for extraction." As the team prepared to withdraw, Rodriguez couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong about this mission. The level of preparation at the compound, the sudden order to abort, and now the clear signs that their position had been compromised, it all pointed to a serious intelligence failure. Kim finished his communication with base and approached Rodriguez with troubling news. "Boss, extraction has been pushed back 2 hours. Helicopter is having mechanical issues and needs repair time." 2 hours? Rodriguez stared at his communications specialist in disbelief. "We don't have 2 hours. If they know we're here, they'll be sending people to find us." Santos called out from his observation position. "Movement in the compound. Looks like they're organizing search parties. Count approximately 15 fighters moving toward our general area." Rodriguez looked at his map, calculating distances and time. The extraction point was 2 kilometers away across difficult terrain. If enemy fighters were already moving in their direction, they might not make it back to the insertion point before being overtaken. "Options?" Thompson asked quietly. Rodriguez studied the terrain between their position and the extraction point. There were several possible routes, but all of them involved crossing open ground that would leave them exposed to observation from the compound. The enemy had the advantage of local knowledge and superior numbers. "We've got 2 choices," Rodriguez said finally. "We can try to make it back to the extraction point and hope we get there before enemy forces intercept us. Or we find a defensive position and wait for the cavalry." Murphy spoke up for the first time since the insertion. "What about the third option?" "What third option?" Rodriguez asked. "We complete the mission," Murphy said. "Hit the compound while they're focused on finding us up here." Rodriguez stared at the youngest member of his team. The suggestion was either brilliant or completely insane. Hit a fortified compound with 30-plus fighters when they were already on alert and actively searching for American forces? It violated every principle of tactical planning he had ever learned. But, as he thought about it, Rodriguez realized Murphy might be onto something. The enemy forces were dispersing to search for them, which meant the compound's defenses were temporarily weakened. If they could get close enough to the compound without being detected, they might be able to complete their mission before the search parties returned. "It's crazy enough that it might work," Thompson said quietly. "They'll never expect us to attack when they know we're in the area." Santos lowered his binoculars and joined the discussion. "I can provide overwatch from here. Got clear sight lines to most of the compound. Won't be able to cover everything, but I can take out sentries and heavy weapon positions."
Rodriguez looked at each member of his team.
These men had followed him through multiple deployments and countless dangerous missions. They trusted his judgment, and he trusted theirs. The smart play was to withdraw and live to fight another day.
But smart wasn't always right.
Kim checked his radio equipment one more time.
Base is going to want an update soon. What do I tell them?
Rodriguez made his decision.
Tell them we're proceeding with the original mission plan. Target of opportunity with enemy forces dispersed. As Kim relayed their intentions to base, Rodriguez could hear the heated discussion that followed.
Command wasn't happy with their decision to continue the mission, but they weren't ordering them to withdraw either.
Sometimes in war, the soldiers on the ground had to make judgment calls that desk officers couldn't make from hundreds of miles away.
The team quickly developed a modified plan of attack. Santos would remain on the ridge with his sniper rifle, providing overwatch and eliminating key targets as the opportunity presented. The rest of the team would descend into the valley and approach the compound from the south, where the terrain provided the best concealment.
As they prepared to move out, Rodriguez felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came before combat.
This wasn't the mission they had planned for, but it was the mission they had been given.
These mountains had already claimed too many American lives. It was time to strike back. Thompson led the descent into the valley, moving carefully through the rocky terrain that provided concealment from enemy observation.
The compound was approximately 800 meters away, close enough that they needed to be extremely careful about noise and movement. Rodriguez could hear Santos settling into his sniper position on the ridge above them, the barely audible sounds of a professional preparing for precision shooting. The approach to the compound took nearly an hour of careful movement through terrain that seemed designed to break ankles and create noise. Every step had to be carefully placed, every movement coordinated to avoid detection. Rodriguez found himself thinking about the families of the soldiers who had been killed by Nasir's network. Those men had trusted their leadership and their intelligence, just as his team was trusting him now. When they reached a position approximately 200 meters from the compound's outer walls, Thompson held up his hand for a final halt. From here, they could see the details that hadn't been visible from the ridge. The compound was even more heavily fortified than they had realized, with multiple layers of defense and clear fields of fire covering all approaches. Rodriguez activated his radio and contacted Santos on the ridge.
Overwatch, this is ground team. We're in position. What's your assessment? Santos's voice came back clear and professional.
Ground team, I count 23 fighters still in the compound. Most of the search parties have moved out, but they left plenty of security behind. I've identified 3 heavy weapon positions and multiple sentries. When you're ready to move, I can start clearing targets. Rodriguez looked at his men, these professionals who had volunteered to risk their lives for a mission that had already gone sideways. Thompson gave him a thumbs up.
Kim nodded his readiness.
Carter checked his medical supplies one final time.
Murphy took a deep breath and chambered a round in his rifle.
All units, this is team leader, Rodriguez whispered into his radio.
Execute on my mark in 3, 2, 1.
The first shot came from Santos on the ridge, a perfectly placed round that dropped a sentry before the man knew he was under attack. Rodriguez and his team moved forward immediately, using the confusion to close the distance to the compound's outer wall. The real fight was just beginning. The compound erupted into chaos as Santos's rifle spoke again from the ridge above. A second sentry dropped, his AK-47 clattering against the stone walls as his body crumpled. Rodriguez led his team in a sprint toward the outer wall, their boots finding purchase on the rocky ground as shouts began echoing from within the compound. The element of surprise wouldn't last long. Thompson reached the wall first, pressing his back against the rough stone and signaling for the others to stack up behind him. The wall was approximately 8 feet high, constructed of local stone that provided both defensive strength and natural camouflage. Rodriguez could hear voices shouting in Pashto from the other side, the unmistakable sounds of men trying to organize a defense against an unexpected attack. Flashbang, Rodriguez whispered, and Murphy immediately produced the grenade from his vest. They had practiced this entry hundreds of times, but never under these exact conditions. The plan called for Thompson to boost Rodriguez over the wall, followed by the flashbang to disorient defenders, then, the rest of the team would follow in rapid succession. Santos's voice crackled through their earpieces, heavy weapons position neutralized on the north wall. You've got approximately 15 seconds before they reorganize. 3 fighters moving toward your position from the main building. Rodriguez nodded to Thompson, who interlaced his fingers to form a step. Rodriguez placed his boot in Thompson's hands and was boosted up and over the wall in one smooth motion. He hit the ground on the other side in a combat crouch, his rifle already aimed toward the main building. The compound's interior was a maze of smaller structures connected by low walls and open areas that would provide little cover once the fighting began. Murphy's flashbang sailed over the wall and detonated with a brilliant white flash and deafening crack that temporarily stunned the defenders. In the seconds of confusion that followed, the rest of the team vaulted over the wall and spread out into defensive positions. Thompson went left toward a storage building, while Kim and Carter moved right toward what appeared to be living quarters. Murphy stayed with Rodriguez, both men focused on the main building where intelligence suggested Nasir would be located. The first return fire came from a window in the main building, muzzle flashes strobing in the early morning light. Rodriguez and Murphy dove behind a low stone wall as bullets cracked overhead. The distinctive sound of AK-47 fire echoed off the compound walls, mixed with the deeper boom of Santos's sniper rifle as he continued engaging targets from his overwatch position.
Movement, second floor, northeast corner, Santos reported. Heavy weapons team setting up. Engaging now. Rodriguez could see the sniper's target through a window in the main building. Two men were trying to position a heavy machine gun that would dominate the compound's central area. Santos's rifle cracked once, and one of the men spun away from the weapon. The second man tried to continue setting up the gun, but another precisely placed shot sent him tumbling out of sight. Thompson's voice came through the radio from his position near the storage building, multiple fighters moving through the connected structures on the east side. Looks like they're trying to flank us. Rodriguez assessed their tactical situation. They were inside the compound with good fields of fire toward the main building, but enemy fighters were moving to surround them. The mission objective was to capture or kill Nasir, who was presumably in the main building, but they couldn't advance while under fire from multiple directions. Kim, can you get eyes on that building with the blue door? Rodriguez called out. The one that was heavily guarded? Kim shifted his position to get a better angle on the building in question. Negative movement visible, but there's definitely something important about that structure. Too many defensive positions around it for normal quarters. Carter, who had been monitoring their medical supplies while maintaining security, suddenly pointed toward the compound's main gate. Boss, we've got vehicles approaching. Looks like the search parties are returning. Rodriguez cursed under his breath. They were about to be caught between the defenders already in the compound and the returning search teams. Their window for completing the mission was closing rapidly. Murphy, who had been quietly observing the main building, suddenly grabbed Rodriguez's arm. Movement in the doorway. Someone important just moved between the buildings. Had two bodyguards with him. Rodriguez raised his binoculars and scanned the area Murphy indicated. For a brief moment, he caught sight of a man in traditional Afghan clothing being escorted by armed fighters between the main building and the structure with the blue door. The man matched the description they had been given of Ahmad Nasir. That's our target, Rodriguez confirmed. He's moving between buildings, probably trying to reach a secure location or escape route. Santos's voice crackled through their radios. Ground team, I've got eyes on multiple vehicles approaching from the north. Estimate 12 to 15 additional fighters inbound. You need to complete this mission and get out of there. Rodriguez made a tactical decision that went against every principle of small unit operations he had ever been taught. Instead of waiting for the enemy to come to them, he was going to take the fight directly to the target. Thompson, Carter, hold this position and cover our withdrawal route, Rodriguez ordered. Kim, Murphy, we're going after Nasir. He's in that blue door building. The three-man assault team moved quickly across the compound's central area, using the confusion and Santos's continued sniper fire to mask their approach. Enemy fighters were still trying to organize an effective defense, many of them taking cover from the precision fire coming from the ridge above. As they approached the building with the blue door, Rodriguez could see why it had been so heavily guarded. The structure was built into the hillside behind the compound, with thick stone walls and narrow windows that would be difficult to assault. It was designed as a final defensive position, a place where important people could make a last stand. Murphy found a position behind a low wall that provided cover and a clear field of fire toward the building's entrance. I can cover the door from here, he reported. But if there's another way out of that building, we won't see it from this angle. Kim set up his communication equipment and contacted Santos. Overwatch, can you see any other exits from the target building? Negative on visible exits, but the structure extends into the hillside. Could be tunnels or hidden doors on the backside where I can't see. Rodriguez studied the building's entrance.
The blue door was made of heavy wood reinforced with metal bands, designed to stop everything short of explosives. There were no windows at ground level, and the few windows on the upper level were narrow slits that would be impossible to climb through. We're going to have to go through the front door, Rodriguez decided. Murphy, give us covering fire. Kim, breach charges. Kim produced the explosive charges they would need to blow the door. The charges were small but powerful, designed specifically for urban combat situations where precision was more important than raw destructive power. He quickly attached them to the door's hinges and lock mechanism while Murphy and Rodriguez provided security. From their original positions, Thompson and Carter were maintaining steady fire against enemy fighters trying to advance across the compound. The sound of their rifles mixed with the deeper crack of Santos's sniper rifle and the chatter of enemy automatic weapons. The tactical situation was becoming more complex by the minute. Vehicles have stopped approximately 200 meters outside the compound, Santos reported. Fighters are dismounting and moving to surround the area. Estimate you have maybe 5 minutes before they complete the encirclement. Rodriguez checked his watch. They had been on the ground for less than 30 minutes, but it felt like hours. The adrenaline was keeping him sharp and focused, but he could feel the weight of time pressure building. They needed to complete this mission and extract before the tactical situation became impossible. Kim finished setting the breach charges and moved to a safe distance. Charges set. Ready to blow on your command. Rodriguez positioned himself near the door, with Murphy providing overwatch from his covered position. Execute breach in 3, 2, 1. The explosion was smaller than Rodriguez had expected, but perfectly effective. The heavy wooden door disintegrated into splinters, and smoke poured from the opening. Rodriguez immediately moved through the breach, his rifle ready to engage any defenders inside. The interior of the building was darker than expected, lit only by oil lamps and the narrow windows near the ceiling. Rodriguez's eyes quickly adjusted to reveal a large room filled with weapon caches, communications equipment, and maps spread across several tables. This wasn't just a hideout, it was a command center. But there was no sign of Nazir or any other defenders. The room appeared to have been abandoned moments before their breach. Kim entered behind Rodriguez, immediately moving to examine the communications equipment. This stuff is still warm, he reported. Someone was using it very recently. Murphy maintained his position outside, scanning for threats while Rodriguez and Kim searched the building. The absence of defenders was concerning, either Nazir had escaped through a hidden exit, or this was some kind of trap. Rodriguez moved deeper into the building, finding a narrow staircase that led to an upper level. The stairs were carved directly into the stone hillside, suggesting this structure was much older than it appeared from the outside. He climbed carefully, his rifle ready for contact at any moment. The upper level contained living quarters that showed recent occupation. Personal belongings were scattered around the room as if someone had left in a hurry. Most importantly, Rodriguez found documents scattered across a desk near one of the narrow windows. Even without being able to read the Arabic and Pashto text, he could see these were operational plans with maps and target locations marked. Kim's voice carried up from the lower level, "Boss, you need to see this. Found what looks like a tunnel entrance behind this equipment rack." Rodriguez gathered the documents from the desk and returned to the main level. Kim had indeed found a concealed entrance that led into a tunnel carved into the hillside. The tunnel was narrow but appeared to extend deep into the mountain. Escape route, Rodriguez concluded. Nazir probably used it the moment our attack began. Murphy's voice crackled through their radios with urgent information, multiple fighters approaching from the main building. Looks like they're trying to retake this position. Rodriguez made a quick decision. They had found valuable intelligence in the form of the documents and the communications equipment, but their primary target had escaped. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly, and they needed to extract before being surrounded. Kim, can you carry any of that communications equipment? Negative, too heavy and complicated to move quickly. Then, document everything you can with your camera and let's get out of here. Kim quickly photographed the communications setup and gathered several documents while Rodriguez provided security. Outside, they could hear Murphy engaging targets with controlled bursts of rifle fire. Thompson's voice came through their radios, "Ground team, we need to move soon.
Enemy reinforcements are setting up positions to cut off our withdrawal route."
Rodriguez and Kim exited the building to find Murphy in a fierce firefight with enemy fighters advancing from multiple directions. The tactical situation had changed dramatically in the few minutes they had been inside the building.
Enemy fighters were using the compound's internal structures as cover to advance on their position.
Santos provided critical information from his overwatch position. "Ground team, you've got approximately 20 fighters moving to surround your position. Recommend immediate withdrawal to the south wall where you entered."
Rodriguez assessed their options.
They could try to fight their way back to the entry point, but that would mean moving across open ground under enemy fire. Alternatively, they could try to use Nazir's escape tunnel, but that would take them into unknown territory without any support from Santos.
"We go back the way we came," Rodriguez decided. "Fighting withdrawal to the south wall. Santos, can you suppress the heavy weapons positions?"
"Already on it," Santos replied, and immediately his rifle began speaking with deadly precision. The withdrawal across the compound was the longest 200 meters Rodriguez had ever covered. Enemy fire seemed to come from every direction as they moved from cover to cover, using the compound's internal structures to shield themselves from the worst of the incoming fire.
Santos's precision shooting from the ridge above was the only thing keeping them from being overwhelmed.
Thompson and Carter had established a base of fire near the south wall, their disciplined shooting forcing enemy fighters to keep their heads down while Rodriguez, Kim, and Murphy crossed the open areas.
The teamwork was flawless, each man covering the others as they moved toward the extraction point.
Murphy was the first to reach the wall, immediately taking a knee and providing covering fire for the others. Kim followed, clutching the documents and camera that contained the intelligence they had gathered. Rodriguez came last, maintaining rear security as they prepared to exit the compound.
"Over the wall, now!"
Rodriguez shouted as enemy fighters began concentrating their fire on their position. One by one, the team scaled the wall and dropped to the rocky ground outside the compound. The extraction point was still 2 kilometers away across difficult terrain, but they had successfully completed their primary mission of gathering intelligence on Nazir's network. Santos's voice carried a note of urgency. "Ground team, enemy vehicles are moving to intercept your route to the extraction point.
Recommend alternate route through the eastern valley."
Rodriguez pulled out his map and quickly identified the route Santos was suggesting. It would add time to their movement, but it would also provide better concealment from enemy observation.
"Copy, Overwatch. We're moving to the alternate route. Can you displace and provide cover for our movement?" "Negative. I'm observing enemy fighters setting up pursuit teams.
I need to stay in position to slow them down." Rodriguez felt a chill of concern for his sniper. Santos was choosing to remain in an exposed position to provide cover for the team's withdrawal, even though it put him at significant risk of being overrun by enemy forces.
"Santos, you need to get out of there." "Negative, boss.
You guys need covering fire more than I need to withdraw right now. I can hold this position for another 20 minutes, maybe 30. The team began moving toward the eastern valley, using the rocky terrain to mask their movement from enemy observation. Behind them, Santos's rifle continued its deadly work, picking off enemy fighters who tried to organize pursuit teams. Thompson took point, leading them through terrain that seemed designed to break ankles and slow movement. The rocky ground was treacherous in daylight, it would be deadly in darkness. But it also provided excellent concealment from enemy observation, which was exactly what they needed. After 30 minutes of hard movement through the rocks, Kim established communication with their extraction helicopter.
"Bird Dog, this is Viper Team. We're moving to alternate extraction point.
What's your status?" The pilot's voice came back with welcome news. "Viper Team, repairs are complete.
We can be at alternate extraction point in 20 minutes. Rodriguez felt a surge of relief.
They were going to make it out with valuable intelligence and all team members accounted for. But his relief was tempered by concern for Santos, who was still providing overwatch from an increasingly dangerous position.
"Santos, we're 20 minutes from extraction. Time for you to displace."
The response that came back chilled Rodriguez to the bone. "Boss, I've got bad news.
Enemy forces have reached my position. I'm surrounded." Rodriguez felt his blood turn to ice as Santos's words sank in.
His sniper, the man who had been providing life-saving overwatch for the entire team, was now trapped on the ridge with enemy forces closing in around him. The tactical situation had just become a nightmare. "Santos, give me your exact position and status," Rodriguez commanded, already turning back toward the ridge where his teammate was fighting for his life. Santos's voice came through the radio between bursts of gunfire. "I'm approximately 50 meters below the ridge crest, eastern side. Estimate 12 to 15 fighters approaching from multiple directions. Limited ammunition and no cover for withdrawal." Thompson grabbed Rodriguez's arm as he started moving back toward the compound. "Boss, we can't go back. Santos knows the risks. We complete the extraction." Rodriguez stared at his team leader, a man he respected and trusted completely. Thompson was right from a purely tactical standpoint. Military doctrine was clear: you don't risk an entire team to save one man, especially when that man had chosen to remain in position to save the others. But Rodriguez had never left a man behind in 6 years of combat operations, and he wasn't about to start now. "Kim, contact the extraction helicopter and tell them to stand by," Rodriguez ordered. "We're going back for Santos." Carter stepped forward, his medical training making him think about casualties rather than tactics. "Boss, even if we can reach Santos, we'll be outnumbered at least 3 to 1. And we'll be fighting uphill against enemies who know the terrain." Rodriguez looked at each member of his team. These men had followed him through multiple deployments and countless dangerous situations. They trusted his judgment, but, more importantly, they shared his commitment to never leaving a brother behind. He could see in their eyes that they would follow him back up that mountain, even knowing it might be a one-way trip. "Murphy, you're our best marksman after Santos," Rodriguez said, making his decision. "Can you provide precision fire support?" Murphy nodded grimly. "Not as good as Santos, but good enough. I can engage targets out to 600 meters with this rifle." Kim finished his communication with the helicopter and rejoined the group. "Extraction bird is standing by at the alternate location. Pilot says he can hold position for 30 minutes before fuel becomes an issue." 30 minutes. Rodriguez did the math quickly in his head. It would take at least 15 minutes to reach Santos's position, assuming they could move quickly through the rocky terrain. That left 15 minutes to extract Santos and get back to the helicopter. It was cutting things very close, but it was possible. Santos's voice crackled through their radios again, this time with more urgency, taking fire from the north and west. "They're trying to flank my position. Could use some help down here." Rodriguez made his final decision. "We go back. Thompson, take point. Murphy, you'll provide overwatch once we reach a position where you can engage targets around Santos. Kim and Carter, you're with me for the actual extraction." The team began moving back toward the ridge, but this time they weren't trying to avoid detection. Speed was more important than stealth now. Thompson led them through the rocky terrain at a pace that was just short of reckless, jumping from boulder to boulder and sliding down loose scree slopes that would have been dangerous to navigate slowly. As they climbed toward Santos's position, Rodriguez could hear the intensifying gunfire from above. The distinctive crack of Santos's sniper rifle was being answered by multiple AK-47s and what sounded like at least one heavy machine gun. The enemy forces had brought serious firepower to deal with the lone sniper. Murphy found a position approximately 400 meters from where Santos was trapped and immediately began engaging targets through his rifle scope. His first shot silenced one of the machine guns that had been suppressing Santos's position. His second shot dropped an enemy fighter who had been trying to work his way around Santos's flank. "Santos, this is Murphy. I've got overwatch on your position now. Can you move to better cover?" Santos's reply came between his own shots, negative. "Surrounded on 3 sides. Only way out is straight down the cliff, and that's not really an option." Rodriguez and the others continued climbing toward Santos's position, using Murphy's covering fire to advance through terrain that would normally have been impossible to cross under enemy observation. They were close enough now to hear individual gunshots and shouting voices as enemy fighters tried to coordinate their assault on the trapped sniper. Thompson held up his hand for a halt when they reached a position where they could see Santos's predicament. The sniper had taken cover behind a cluster of large boulders approximately 50 meters below the ridge crest. Enemy fighters were positioned above him on the ridge and, to both sides, effectively surrounding him except for the sheer drop behind his position. There, Thompson pointed to a group of rocks about 30 meters to Santos's left. If we can get there, we can provide covering fire for him to move to our position.
Rodriguez studied the terrain between their current position and the rocks Thompson had identified.
It would require crossing about 40 meters of open ground that was clearly visible from enemy positions. But it was their best option for reaching Santos. Kim, as soon as we start moving, contact Santos and tell him to be ready to displace on our signal, Rodriguez ordered. Carter, you're going to treat Santos for any wounds once we reach him, then we all move together back to the extraction point. The assault across the open ground was the most terrifying 40 meters Rodriguez had ever covered. Enemy gunfire erupted from multiple positions as soon as they broke cover, bullets striking the rocks around them and whining overhead. Murphy's precision shooting from below helped suppress some of the enemy fire, but there were simply too many shooters for one man to handle.
Thompson reached the rocks first, immediately returning fire toward enemy positions on the ridge. Rodriguez and the others followed, diving behind cover as automatic weapons fire swept across their position.
From here, they were close enough to communicate directly with Santos without using radios.
Santos!
Rodriguez shouted over the gunfire.
Can you move to our position? Santos's response came back immediately, negative. They've got me pinned down completely. Any movement and I'm dead.
Rodriguez assessed their tactical situation. They had reached a position where they could support Santos with covering fire, but the sniper was still trapped and unable to move. The enemy fighters knew exactly where all of them were now, and more reinforcements would be arriving soon. Carter suddenly pointed toward the ridge above them.
Movement on the ridge crest. Looks like they're bringing up a mortar team.
Rodriguez felt his heart sink. If the enemy could bring indirect fire to bear on their position, the mission would be over. There was no cover on this rocky slope that would protect them from mortar fire, and they couldn't move fast enough through this terrain to avoid being targeted. Murphy's voice crackled through their radios, "I can see the mortar team.
Engaging now."
Rodriguez watched through his binoculars as Murphy engaged the mortar team with precision fire. The first shot dropped one of the crew members, causing the others to dive for cover. But Murphy was too far away to completely suppress the mortar position, and they would undoubtedly try to complete their setup. "We need to get Santos out of there right now," Thompson said grimly.
"Before that mortar gets operational." Rodriguez looked at Santos's position, then at the terrain between them.
The distance was only about 30 meters, but it was completely open ground with no cover whatsoever. Anyone trying to cross that space would be exposed to enemy fire from multiple directions.
Smoke grenades, Rodriguez decided. We use smoke to cover Santos's movement to our position.
Kim and Carter each produced smoke grenades from their gear. The grenades would provide concealment, but only for a few minutes. Once the smoke cleared, they would all be trapped in the same small area with limited options for escape. Rodriguez activated his radio and contacted Murphy. "Murphy, we're about to pop smoke for Santos to move to our position.
Can you suppress the enemy positions on the ridge?"
"I'll do what I can," Murphy replied. "But there are too many targets for one rifle." Rodriguez looked at Thompson, then at Kim and Carter. These men had already risked their lives to come back for Santos. Now he was asking them to risk everything on a plan that had only a marginal chance of success.
"Everyone clear on the plan?" Rodriguez asked. "We pop smoke, Santos moves to our position, then we all withdraw together toward Murphy's position." Thompson nodded.
"Clear." Kim and Carter both confirmed their understanding. Rodriguez pulled the pin on his smoke grenade and hurled it toward Santos's position. Kim and Carter followed with their grenades, and within seconds a thick gray cloud began obscuring the area between the two positions.
"Santos, move now!" Rodriguez shouted. Through the smoke, Rodriguez could see the dim outline of Santos leaving his cover and sprinting toward their position.
Enemy gunfire erupted immediately, muzzle flashes visible through the gray cloud as fighters tried to target the moving figure. Santos was halfway across the open ground when Rodriguez heard a sound that made his blood run cold, the distinctive whistle of an incoming mortar round.
"Incoming!" Thompson shouted.
The mortar round exploded approximately 20 meters from Santos's position, the blast visible even through the thick smoke. Rodriguez felt the concussion wave wash over their position and heard the deadly whisper of shrapnel cutting through the air.
"Santos!" Rodriguez called out. Report. For several seconds, there was no response.
The smoke was beginning to clear, and Rodriguez could see a figure lying motionless on the rocky ground where Santos had been running.
Carter immediately grabbed his medical kit. I'm going after him. Rodriguez grabbed the medic's arm. Wait for the smoke to clear. We need to see what we're dealing with.
As the smoke dissipated, Rodriguez could see Santos lying approximately 10 meters from their position. The sniper was moving, trying to crawl toward their location, but he was clearly wounded. Blood was visible on his left leg, and his movement was slow and painful. Cover me, Carter said, already moving toward the wounded sniper. Thompson and Rodriguez provided covering fire as Carter sprinted across the open ground to reach Santos. Enemy gunfire erupted from multiple positions, but Murphy's precision shooting from below forced most of the enemy fighters to keep their heads down. Carter reached Santos and immediately began assessing his wounds. Shrapnel to the left leg and possible concussion, the medic reported. He can move, but he'll need assistance. Rodriguez made a decision that would either save his team or get them all killed.
We're all moving together.
Thompson, take point toward Murphy's position.
I'll help Carter with Santos. Kim, rear security.
The withdrawal down the rocky slope while carrying a wounded teammate was the most difficult movement Rodriguez had ever attempted. Enemy fire continued from multiple positions, and the terrain was treacherous even without the added complexity of supporting an injured man.
Santos, despite his wounds, tried to help as much as possible.
Leave me, he kept saying.
Complete the extraction.
Not happening, Rodriguez replied grimly, supporting Santos's weight as they moved from rock to rock down the slope. Murphy continued providing covering fire from his position, but Rodriguez could see enemy fighters beginning to move down the slope above them. The tactical situation was becoming impossible to sustain. Thompson's voice carried back to them over the sound of gunfire, I can see Murphy's position. Another 100 meters and we'll reach his overwatch location. Those 100 meters took nearly 10 minutes to cover while supporting Santos and avoiding enemy fire.
When they finally reached Murphy's position, Rodriguez could see the relief on his marksman's face. Extraction point is 1 kilometer southeast, Murphy reported.
Helicopter is standing by, but we're running out of time.
Fuel situation is becoming critical.
Rodriguez looked at his wounded sniper, then at the rest of his team. They had successfully extracted Santos from an impossible situation, but they still needed to reach the helicopter while being pursued by enemy forces who knew exactly where they were going. Kim established communication with the extraction helicopter. Bird Dog, this is Viper Team.
We have 1 wounded, moving to extraction point now.
What's your fuel status? The pilot's response was not encouraging. Viper Team, I can hold position for maybe 15 more minutes, then I have to return to base regardless of your status.
15 minutes. Rodriguez looked at the terrain between their position and the extraction point.
Under normal circumstances, it would take at least 20 minutes to cover that distance through the rocky ground. With a wounded teammate, it would take even longer. But, as Rodriguez prepared to lead his team on what might be their final movement, he heard something that changed everything, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors approaching from the east. But, it wasn't their extraction helicopter. The sound was wrong, the engine no different. Thompson grabbed his binoculars and scanned the eastern horizon.
Enemy helicopter inbound. Looks like a Russian-made transport, probably carrying reinforcements.
Rodriguez felt the tactical situation shift from difficult to impossible. They were about to be caught in the open with limited ammunition, a wounded teammate, and enemy forces approaching from both the ground and the air. Murphy chambered another round and took aim toward the approaching helicopter. I can engage the aircraft, but rifle fire isn't going to bring down a transport helicopter. Rodriguez activated his radio for what might be his final transmission to their extraction helicopter. Bird Dog, we have enemy air assets inbound.
Request immediate extraction at alternate site.
The response came back with static interference that suggested the enemy helicopter was jamming their communications. Viper Team, understand, enemy air, unable to, extraction. As the enemy helicopter grew closer, Rodriguez could see armed fighters preparing to fast rope down to the ground. In a few minutes, they would be surrounded by fresh enemy forces with superior numbers and better positioning. It was then that Rodriguez heard a sound that would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life, the whistling of incoming mortar rounds, multiple tubes firing simultaneously. The enemy forces had brought their indirect fire to bear on their position.
Incoming mortars! Rodriguez shouted. Everyone find hard cover.
The first salvo of mortar rounds began exploding around their position, the concussion shaking loose rocks from the mountainside and filling the air with deadly fragments. Rodriguez pulled Santos into the limited cover provided by a large boulder while the rest of his team scattered to whatever protection they could find.
The bombardment continued for several minutes, rounds falling in a pattern designed to destroy anything in a wide area around their position.
When it finally stopped, Rodriguez's ears were ringing and the air was filled with dust and smoke.
Sound off! Rodriguez called out.
One by one, his team members reported their status. Miraculously, none of them had been hit by the mortar fire, though everyone had minor cuts and bruises from flying rock fragments. But their situation had become desperate. The enemy helicopter was now directly overhead, and Rodriguez could see armed fighters preparing to fast rope down to surround them. Their extraction helicopter was nowhere to be seen, and enemy ground forces were advancing on their position from multiple directions. Rodriguez looked at his team, these men who had risked everything to save Santos and complete their mission. They had performed magnificently under impossible conditions, but now they were facing a situation that no amount of training or courage could overcome. It was then that Rodriguez heard a sound that seemed impossible, the crack of a high-powered rifle from somewhere high above them on the mountain. The first shot from the unknown sniper struck one of the fighters hanging from the enemy helicopter, sending the man tumbling to the rocky ground below. The precision and range of the shot was extraordinary. Rodriguez estimated the shooter had to be at least 800 meters away, positioned somewhere high on the mountain above them. Rodriguez grabbed his binoculars and scanned the rocky peaks above their position, trying to identify where the shots were coming from. The sound was definitely that of a high-powered rifle, something much larger than the standard military weapons his team carried. But he couldn't see any muzzle flash or movement that would reveal the sniper's position. The second shot from the concealed shooter struck the enemy helicopter's pilot, causing the aircraft to lurch violently to one side. The remaining fighters who had been preparing to fast rope immediately began emergency procedures as their transport struggled to maintain altitude. Rodriguez watched in amazement as the helicopter began auto-rotating toward a forced landing several hundred meters away. Thompson crawled over to Rodriguez's position, his face showing the same confusion Rodriguez felt.
"Boss, that's not one of ours. Command didn't mention any other assets in the area."
Rodriguez activated his radio and attempted to contact the unknown sniper. "Unknown shooter, this is Viper Team.
Identify yourself." The response came back in heavily accented English. "Viper Team, this is Khan. Continue your movement to extraction point.
I will provide overwatch."
Khan.
Rodriguez searched his memory for any mention of that name in their mission briefing, but came up empty. The accent sounded local, possibly Afghan or Pakistani, but the tactical skills being demonstrated were clearly professional military level. Murphy, who had been observing the downed helicopter through his rifle scope, provided additional information. "Whoever this Khan is, he just saved our lives. That helicopter crew is neutralized, and the fighters who were approaching from the north have gone to ground. They're scared of this guy."
Santos, despite his wounds, managed to speak through gritted teeth. "Boss, we need to move while we have the advantage. My leg's not going to get any better sitting here."
Rodriguez made a tactical decision based on limited information and desperate circumstances. They would trust this unknown sniper to provide overwatch while they moved toward the extraction point. It wasn't ideal to rely on someone they couldn't identify, but their alternatives were even worse. "All units, we're moving to the extraction point now," Rodriguez commanded. "Stay alert for enemy contact, but don't engage the unknown sniper unless he fires on us." The team began moving southeast toward their extraction point, with Thompson taking point and Rodriguez helping support Santos's weight. The wounded sniper was doing his best to keep up, but Rodriguez could see the pain in his face with every step across the rocky terrain. Kim maintained communication with their extraction helicopter while they moved. "Bird Dog, this is Viper Team.
We're moving to extraction point with unknown friendly providing overwatch.
What's your status?"
The pilot's response was clearer now that they had moved away from the enemy helicopter's jamming equipment. "Viper Team, we're inbound to extraction point. Estimate 5 minutes to arrival.
Be advised, we're seeing multiple enemy vehicles approaching your area from the north." Rodriguez could hear the sound of truck engines in the distance, getting closer as enemy reinforcements rushed toward the area where the helicopter had crashed. They needed to reach the extraction point before being caught in the open by superior enemy forces. The unknown sniper continued his deadly work from somewhere high above them. Rodriguez could hear the periodic crack of the high-powered rifle, followed by the cessation of enemy movement or return fire. Whoever this Khan was, he was systematically eliminating enemy fighters who tried to pursue them. Carter, who had been monitoring Santos's condition while they moved, called for a brief halt. "Boss, Santos is losing blood faster than I'd like. I need 30 seconds to apply a pressure bandage." Rodriguez agreed to the halt, positioning Thompson and Murphy to provide security while Carter worked on Santos's wound. During the brief pause, Rodriguez tried again to contact the unknown sniper. "Khan, this is Viper Team Leader. Can you provide your position and unit identification?" The response came back with what sounded like amusement in the heavily accented voice. "Viper Team Leader, I am not part of your military. I am freelance. Continue your movement." Freelance. Rodriguez had heard rumors of local fighters who operated independently, sometimes helping American forces and sometimes fighting against them. But he had never encountered one with this level of professional skill and equipment. Murphy, who had been scanning the surrounding terrain through his rifle scope, suddenly pointed toward a ridge approximately 600 meters to their northeast. "There. I can see muzzle flash from that position. Khan's up there, and he's got what looks like a 50 caliber rifle." Rodriguez raised his binoculars and focused on the area Murphy had indicated. For a brief moment, he caught sight of a figure in traditional Afghan clothing lying prone behind a massive rifle that was indeed much larger than anything his team carried. The range and precision of the shots they had witnessed suddenly made sense. Thompson's voice carried back from his point position. "Extraction point is in sight. I can see the helicopter landing now." Rodriguez felt a surge of relief as he saw their extraction helicopter settling onto a relatively flat area of rocky ground approximately 200 meters ahead. The crew chief was already out of the aircraft, scanning the area for threats while the pilots kept the engines running for immediate departure. But their relief was short-lived. Kim's radio crackled with an urgent transmission from the helicopter. "Viper Team, we have multiple enemy vehicles approaching from the north and west. Estimate 20 to 30 fighters dismounting approximately 400 meters from your position." Rodriguez could see the enemy vehicles through his binoculars, 3 trucks loaded with armed fighters who were spreading out to surround the extraction area. The helicopter crew was now in danger as well as his team. "Bird Dog, can you extract immediately?" Rodriguez asked. "Negative, Viper Team. Too much enemy fire. We need suppression before we can take off safely." Rodriguez assessed their tactical situation. They were approximately 200 meters from the helicopter, with enemy forces closing in from multiple directions. Santos was wounded and moving slowly, and they had limited ammunition remaining after the prolonged firefight. It was then that Khan's voice crackled through their radio with an offer that changed everything. "Viper Team, I can provide covering fire for your extraction, but I need you to mark enemy positions with smoke grenades." Rodriguez looked at his team. They had 2 smoke grenades remaining, hardly enough to mark all the enemy positions that were threatening their extraction. But it was their only option for getting everyone out alive. "Thompson, Murphy, mark the enemy positions to the north with smoke," Rodriguez ordered. "Kim, mark the western approach. I'll help Santos reach the helicopter." The smoke grenades sailed through the air and landed among the enemy positions, immediately creating thick gray clouds that marked their locations for Khan's precision fire. Rodriguez and Carter began moving Santos toward the helicopter as quickly as possible across the rocky ground. What followed was the most extraordinary display of long-range marksmanship Rodriguez had ever witnessed. Khan's massive rifle began speaking with methodical precision, each shot finding its target despite the extreme range. Enemy fighters began diving for cover as their comrades fell to precisely placed shots that seemed to come from nowhere. Thompson and Murphy provided close-range covering fire as the team moved toward the helicopter, their rifle fire mixing with the deeper boom of Khan's 50 caliber rifle. The enemy forces found themselves caught between precision fire from the mountain above and disciplined fire from the SEAL team. Rodriguez and Carter reached the helicopter with Santos just as the crew chief was laying down suppressing fire with his door-mounted machine gun. They loaded Santos into the cabin and immediately turned to provide covering fire for Thompson, Murphy, and Kim as they completed their withdrawal. Thompson reached the helicopter first, diving through the cabin door as bullets struck the aircraft's armor plating. Murphy followed, then Kim, all three men making it safely aboard despite heavy enemy fire from multiple directions.
Everyone's aboard,
Rodriguez shouted to the pilots.
Go, go, go.
The helicopter lifted off immediately, gaining altitude as quickly as possible while the crew chief continued firing at enemy positions below. Rodriguez watched through the cabin window as the mountainous terrain fell away beneath them, finally, allowing himself to believe they were going to make it out alive. But Khan was still on the mountain, and enemy forces would undoubtedly try to find and kill the sniper who had caused them so many casualties. Rodriguez activated his radio one final time.
Khan, this is Viper Team. We're clear of the area. What's your extraction plan? The response came back with what was definitely amusement in the voice. Viper Team, these mountains are my home. I do not need extraction.
Rodriguez tried to respond, but there was no answer. Khan had disappeared back into the mountains as mysteriously as he had appeared, leaving Rodriguez with more questions than answers about the identity of the man who had saved their lives.
Santos, despite his wounds and exhaustion, managed to speak over the helicopter's engine noise. Boss, who was that guy?
Rodriguez looked at his wounded sniper, then at the rest of his team. They had completed their mission, gathered valuable intelligence on Nasir's network, and extracted safely despite facing overwhelming odds. But they owed their lives to a mysterious Afghan sniper whose motives and identity remained completely unknown.
I don't know, Rodriguez replied honestly.
But I'm glad he was on our side.
Thompson leaned forward from his position near the cabin door. Think we'll ever see him again?
Rodriguez considered the question as he watched the mountain peaks passing below them. These mountains had been home to countless wars and conflicts, populated by people whose loyalties and motivations were often impossible for outsiders to understand. Khan could have been a former military officer, a tribal leader, or simply a man with his own reasons for fighting Taliban forces. In these mountains, you never know who you might meet, Rodriguez said finally. Kim was already working on his after-action report, documenting the events of the mission for the intelligence officers who would analyze every detail.
How do I write up the part about Khan in the official report? Rodriguez thought about that question.
How do you explain to desk officers hundreds of miles away that your mission was saved by a mysterious local fighter with no apparent military affiliation? How do you document the skills and equipment that Khan had demonstrated without being able to verify his identity or motivation?
Write it up exactly as it happened, Rodriguez decided.
Let the intelligence people figure out who he was and why he helped us.
Carter finished treating Santos's wounds and provided his medical assessment. Santos is going to be fine.
The shrapnel missed any major blood vessels, and there's no sign of serious internal injuries. He'll need surgery to remove the fragments, but he should be back to full duty in a few months.
Santos managed a weak smile. Thanks for coming back for me, boss.
I know it wasn't the tactically sound decision. Rodriguez looked at each member of his team, these men who had risked everything to ensure no one was left behind.
It was the only decision I could make. We're a team. We go home together or we don't go home at all.
Murphy was cleaning his rifle, performing the routine maintenance that was second nature to all professional soldiers.
Think Nasir got away through that tunnel? Probably, Rodriguez admitted. But we got his communications equipment and operational plans.
Intelligence will be able to use that information to roll up his entire network. Thompson nodded toward the documents Kim had secured from the compound. Those papers could lead to a dozen other high-value targets. This mission might have been more successful than we realized. As the helicopter carried them back toward base, Rodriguez found himself thinking about the broader implications of what they had experienced. Afghanistan was a country where alliances shifted like sand dunes, where today's enemy might become tomorrow's ally based on circumstances that outsiders could never fully understand. Khan represented something that Rodriguez had heard about but never experienced directly, the reality that in this ancient land, there were people fighting their own wars for their own reasons. Sometimes those private wars aligned with American interests, and sometimes they didn't. The key was recognizing the difference and knowing how to respond appropriately. The pilot's voice came through their headsets with a welcome announcement. Viper Team, we're approaching base.
Medical personnel are standing by to treat your wounded.
Rodriguez could see the lights of their forward operating base growing larger ahead of them. In a few minutes, they would be back in the familiar world of military procedures and debriefings, after-action reports and intelligence analysis. But something had changed during this mission, something that went beyond the tactical success of gathering intelligence on Nasir's network. They had been saved by a man they couldn't identify, who had asked for nothing in return and had disappeared back into the mountains as mysteriously as he had appeared. It was a reminder that in Afghanistan, the real power often lay not with the armies and governments that appeared on official maps, but with individuals whose knowledge of the terrain and commitment to their cause could change the outcome of any engagement. The helicopter touched down on the landing pad with a gentle bump, and Rodriguez felt the familiar sensation of solid ground beneath them. Santos was immediately transferred to a medical stretcher and taken toward the base hospital, with Carter accompanying him to brief the medical staff on his treatment. As Rodriguez and the rest of his team walked toward the debriefing room, Thompson asked the question that was on everyone's mind, "Boss, do you think Khan is going to be okay up there? Enemy forces are going to be looking for him." Rodriguez looked back toward the mountains they had just left, dark silhouettes against the star-filled sky. Somewhere up there, a mysterious sniper with extraordinary skills was continuing his own private war against forces that threatened whatever he was trying to protect. "I think Khan can take care of himself," Rodriguez replied. "Anyone who can make those shots at that range while moving through terrain like that has been doing this for a long time." Kim was already preparing his preliminary report for the intelligence officers who would want to debrief them within the hour. "The communications equipment we photographed is going to give the analysts plenty to work with. And those operational documents could be the key to understanding Nasir's entire network." Rodriguez nodded, but found his thoughts returning to the mysterious figure who had saved their lives. In all his years of military service, he had never encountered anything quite like Khan, a man with professional-level skills and equipment who operated completely outside any official chain of command. As they entered the debriefing room, Rodriguez made a mental note to include a recommendation in his after-action report. If Khan was operating in the area and willing to provide assistance to American forces, it might be worth establishing some kind of communication or coordination protocol. The man had just proven he could be extraordinarily valuable as an ally. The intelligence officer who conducted their debriefing was particularly interested in Khan's involvement in the mission. "Can you describe the equipment he was using?" "High-powered rifle, definitely not standard military issue," Rodriguez replied. Range and accuracy suggested it was something like a .50 caliber anti-material weapon. The precision was extraordinary. "And you have no idea of his identity or affiliation?" "None whatsoever. He spoke English with a local accent, seemed to know the terrain intimately, and had equipment that would cost more than most people in this region see in a lifetime." The intelligence officer made notes that Rodriguez couldn't read upside down. "We'll include this information in our analysis of local assets. If this Khan is willing to provide assistance to coalition forces, it could be strategically significant." After the debriefing was complete, Rodriguez found himself standing outside the base hospital where Santos was undergoing surgery to remove shrapnel from his leg. Thompson joined him, both men too wound up from the mission to consider sleep. "Hell of a thing," Thompson said quietly. "Which part?" Rodriguez asked. "All of it. The mission going sideways, Santos getting trapped, finding out our intel was wrong about the compound defenses. And then, having some mystery sniper save our lives." Rodriguez nodded. It had been one of those missions where everything that could go wrong had gone wrong, except for the one thing they couldn't have planned for, the intervention of an unknown ally who had asked for nothing in return. "Think we'll ever find out who he really was?" Thompson asked. Rodriguez looked up at the mountains surrounding their base, dark shapes against the starlit sky. "Maybe. Or maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is that in a place like this, sometimes help comes from directions you never expected." A medic emerged from the hospital with news about Santos. "Surgery went well. All the shrapnel has been removed, and there's no permanent damage. He'll be on limited duty for a few weeks, but he should make a full recovery." Rodriguez felt a wave of relief wash over him. His entire team was going home safely. They had completed their primary mission of gathering intelligence, and they had done it without leaving anyone behind. It was the kind of outcome that made all the risks and uncertainties of their profession worthwhile. As Rodriguez finally headed toward his quarters to get some rest, he made one final radio call to the base communications center. "This is Viper Team Leader. If anyone monitoring local frequencies picks up any traffic from someone identifying as Khan, I want to be notified immediately." "Copy that, Viper Team Leader. We'll monitor for any Khan-related communications." Rodriguez settled into his bunk with the satisfaction of a mission completed successfully, but also with the knowledge that somewhere in the mountains above them, a mysterious ally was continuing his own private war. In Afghanistan, Rodriguez had learned, you never knew where your next ally might come from or what price they might ask for their assistance.
Khan had asked for nothing.
He had simply appeared when needed, provided exactly the assistance required, and disappeared back into the mountains. It was a reminder that in this complex and dangerous country, the most important relationships were often the ones that couldn't be quantified in official reports or strategic planning documents. Rodriguez closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but found his thoughts returning to the sound of that massive rifle cracking from somewhere high above them, each shot perfectly placed to eliminate threats and protect American lives. Tomorrow there would be more missions, more dangers, and more opportunities to work with local allies whose motivations and methods might be impossible to understand fully. But tonight, his team was safe, their mission was complete, and somewhere in the Hindu Kush Mountains, a man called Khan was continuing his own fight for reasons that might never be fully explained. In Afghanistan, Rodriguez reflected, that was probably as close to a perfect ending as anyone had a right to expect.